All right, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending today's webinar, The Cost of Doing Business. I'm joined here by Ray Grainger, the CEO of Mavenlink. A couple quick points of structure. We're going to start off with a presentation. While that presentation is occurring, if you have any questions that already you came to the webinar with, or it drives any questions, please input those for us on the right-hand side. And then we'll make sure that we leave time at the end of the presentation to respond to those questions. And at the end of the webinar, we'll close it out and are looking forward to working with all of you in the near future. To get started, here's Ray Grainger, the CEO of Mavenlink.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks very much for your participation. I'm going to do a couple things just to get the screen up here. Yeah, and so just hang on one quick second, Gary. Let me see your. Okay, very good. So we've got the screen back up. What you'll notice is we just had a pop-up. And so we've got a very, very full webinar today. We were just really pleased to see the number of people that decided to participate here. We'll have people join us. We had several hundred respondents, and so we will have people joining throughout the webinar. We have, I think, something like 400 people who are going to join us. Let me go ahead and tee this up. So welcome again. I'm Ray Grainger, and the CEO of Mavenlink, joined here by Sean. And we're the co-founders of Mavenlink, what we refer to as growth management software. To share with you just a little bit about why we founded Mavenlink, really on the premise that we believe that every business deserves a chance to be successful, and that we set out to level the playing field. You'll see from our experience that we've got both small as well as large enterprise experience in our careers. And what we noticed out there was that large businesses had the ability to access technology and grow their businesses confidently and profitably, but the smaller and medium businesses did not. And that's why we founded Mavenlink, to bring the best practices that we have from our experience in consulting and software development, and bring that through a software as a service model to the small and medium business segment. By way of a little bit of background, I spent most of my professional career at Accenture doing a business consulting, as well as large and small business software deployments. Also spent a considerable amount of time at Inquira. Inquira was a software company where I led professional services. And so I've got the mix of having done business consulting and having the core business be a consulting and professional services business, as well as being embedded in a software company and providing the services related to that. And they're two very different models. They share a lot in common, but managing those businesses profitably is very different. And I think we'll be able to share some points of view on that. And I'm joined here by Sean, who's really going to help us moderate the webinar, help direct any of the chats and questions that come in throughout the webinar, which we'll hold until the end, and we'll have plenty of time at the end to answer questions. I'm anticipating us going about 30-40 minutes. We've allocated an hour, and at the end being able to address any of the questions that come in throughout the webinar. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We've probably got a little bit of lag on the slides, and so I'm going to go a little bit slowly on how I tee them up to make sure that everybody stays on pace here. But what we'll cover are a set of macro business trends and workforce trends that I think really set the stage for what's happening out there in both a business as well as how that impacts the professional service provider industry. And when I talk about professional service providers, business consultants, IT services professionals, people that are in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, people who are part of anything having to do with marketing agencies, PR, website development. Really that's the group of folks that I'm talking about. At Mavenlink, we have 600,000 people who are using Mavenlink across the globe, and so we get a lot of people from every industry you can possibly imagine sharing their thinking with us. So we'll share what's going on in the general workforce, and then talk about what is happening out there from your customer base. How do the customers perceive the services that you all and we all provide? And then how does that correspond on the provider side? What are the challenges that folks face? And with that backdrop then, I'd like to share some aspects to growing a profitable project-based services business and doing that confidently. Share with you, my experience, as well as to some degree the experience that we've gleaned from our very large customer base. Right? We have a very, very sharp and expansive customer base, and as we've grown our service, they've shared with us just fantastic input, and that's really how we've developed the business, is based on our experience as well as just thousands and thousands of points of input. And it's really part of the launch of this webinar series, is for us to stay better connected, be more accessible to our customer base or potential customer base, and have them understand our point of view on managing services business and the technology that we provide to enable people to do that better, and to take their input to guide the capability that we provide out to our customers. And with that, then I'll summarize, as you go out and you look at technology, either it's us or you're a prospective Mavenlink customer, what are the kinds of things that you might consider? And so this is really, it's a business webinar. It's not a demonstration of Mavenlink, though we'd be happy to do that. If you want to do that, we're easy to find and get a hold of. You can click on our website and ask for a demo. We'd be happy to do that for you and take you through that in some depth. But the intent of this webinar is to share our experience and thinking, how it guides us when we look at delivering the service that we provide to all of you, and then as you guide and grow your business confidently and profitably, how can we have mind share around how we might share that and do that together. And so that's the basis. So let me start then by talking about the major business trend that's going on out there. This has been happening for the last 10 to 15 years, perhaps even longer. But when you look at the customers that you serve, and in these businesses, and both small and large, they've been breaking down into smaller collaborative networks. You've heard about context and content and people focusing on their core business and either outsourcing or engaging in contractors or professional services help. This has provided businesses with more flexibility both in their resources, time to market, etc. And this trend is accelerating. And what that means is that it's given rise to a very rapidly growing, call it contingent workforce, that by all estimates will account for 40% of the entire workforce by 2020. When I talk about contingent workforce, the contingent workforce goes by many names. They're business consultants, contractors, free agents or freelancers, so independents or micropreneurs. They go by many names, but they're essentially the service provider industry. Now your customer side of the equation, and they're spending up to 40% of their workforce, which might be 40 to 50% of all of their labor costs, then is actually spent outside their company. So CFO Magazine did a survey. This is about 18 months ago or so, and they surveyed CFOs based on this trend of having used so much of their workforce outside their company. Are you getting any value for it? Right? 71% of them came back and said either they're unable to determine the value or there's no value delivered. So this is what was astonishing, and helped me reflect back on my own experience as the business consultant for 20 years serving the marketplace. And I wanted to tee this up in the webinar to have you think about, when you look at growing your business and profitably growing your business, what do you think your customers perceive the value of your service, right? Because that impacts the growth of your business and profitability probably more than any other single thing. If they perceive high value, you usually end up with more enduring client relationships, better account management. Oftentimes they're willing to pay a premium because of the trust that you've built. also the ability to provide transparency to your customers versus say the weekly or monthly status report of leveraging technology and communications to provide them real-time immediate visibility into the progress of the projects that you're working on. And so I tee this up to say this is probably one of the single most important things, is the perception of value that you provide in the mind of your customer. When you look at the flip side then, and you look at all of us as service providers making up nearly 40% of the workforce, across the board it can be fairly inefficient. And I use this example as I'll call it the extreme case, and it really shows you the activities that call them a freelancer independent consultant might look at when that person looks at their business, that as little as 34% of their business might be on paid consulting. The other made up by a lot of other stuff: admin, proposing and selling, traveling to meet with clients, doing planning activity, and other. And it's really hard to grow a business profitably on a 34% billable time ratio. So that sort of shows the extreme that you might have at the lower end of an independent consultant. At companies that are the large service providers like an Accenture or a Deloitte or some of these at the very, very high end, they would operate their businesses on an 85% billable time for all of their consulting professionals. So that sort of shows the range of those different extremes. And so when you look at this, you really assume what size of company I am, what are my BD costs, what is the length of my relationships that I have, what are the perceived value, as well as all the operating efficiencies to help grow my business. So you wouldn't want to be in the 34% range. You'd want to be at the much higher end, 60 to 70% if you're an individual business consultant, and the large consultants that have some scale and leverage, at the 85% level. So that's just sort of a benchmark and stating what the challenge is. When you look at the core business functions then of a service-based business, all of them really affect growth and profitability. From business development, resource management, all the financial management, and then of course the project or service execution, and then knowledge management. Being able to leverage service offerings where you've got pre-built content and capability there to be able to leverage that. So let me go ahead and jump into one key core concept. Okay, that should bring back up again. Hang on, just hold on one second. Okay, I want to help make sure that we stay on track with the lag, so I've just got a monitor in here to tell me when we might be lagging. So we're now on the slide of what I think is really a core fundamental element of managing a services businesses. In the headline there, if you manage every project that you have as its own P&L, you've basically got an infinitely scalable business. And so I'll pause with that, because when we interact and talk with our customer base, that's really where we get a lot of mind share. That most of them that are looking to grow profitably and confidently look to manage their business and every single project that they engage in as its own profit and loss. And when you look at that, you can look at the P&L from the business, the overall business, and the margins that you make at the business level, at each customer or client, down to the project or job, and all the way down to the resource, and look at margin on each of those dimensions. The factors affecting your margins, right? Your business development costs, the resources that you utilize. So one important concept that we'll talk about more is the mix between the employees that you have or the network of contractors that you employ, but also the pyramid, right? The mix of senior versus junior personnel, which really influence essentially blended cost rate. You might have have a blended bill rate across the board, but really it's your cost rate in that mix that's going to affect your margins. And then utilization, right? How much bench or billable and non-billable time do you have, as well as budgets, right? The fees that you can get for the work that you do, and the terms in which you can bill for those services. There's another element that's probably equally as critical in all of this, and that's what I refer to as execution errors. And execution errors happen when you've got missed expectations set at the outside of a project or engagement with a customer, that there's poor scope definition, that changes to scope or schedule are not managed well, and that you end up not getting paid for work that you believe was necessary and intended to do, but was not agreed upon or expectations set with your customer. So all of these things go into managing a business profitably and confidently. And if you've got your a plan, a strategy, and operational capability around each of these dimensions, you can manage every part of your business, every project as a P&L, and essentially grow to any scale that you want to. So with one of the key things then is resource mix and the trade-offs. When you look at your resource strategy, you really need to assess a number of things. The stability of your client work, so what's the demand profile look like? And that really oftentimes has to do with the maturity of your business. If you're just starting out, your demand is going to be spiky. You might seek to have one key client that you provide services for on an enduring basis. A lot of times solo entrepreneurs or business consultants will go that approach. It's difficult to scale a business that way, and so you need to look at the state of your business and the maturity. Also, a really important factor is the range of services. If you're looking at the type of business that you're in, what's the range of service offerings that you'd like to provide? Okay, and so if you want to provide a broad range of services, then you would look to maybe have a larger array of contractors as you grow your business. There's also the consideration of the trade-off between lower risk and higher margins. So if you look at the balance between that, right, on the employee side, you've got your fixed costs, right? You've got people that are going to be potentially on the bench, and managing bench costs is key as you're growing your business, especially if you've got unpredictable demand. On the contractor side, right, it's a variable cost to you. The trade-off there, though, is you might not have them available if you need them to be available to manage your business. Yet you've typically got higher margins with your employees, lower margins with your contractor base because they've got their margin that they're making, and you can't have too much margin stacking and be competitive with your rates. Also, the potential on execution risk. Oftentimes, you feel more confident and trust in the employees that you've hired versus you might be working with a new set of contractors, and you might have execution risk. And we talked about execution errors in eroding margins in your project base. So key thing is looking at the resource mix and how you're going to manage. Now, this is very different depending on the type of company. I talked about my experience within Accenture. So the large, mature businesses that have very predictable demand and have figured out that every project is a P&L would typically have a much higher percentage, 85, 90%, sometimes even larger, of all of their staff will be on the employee side. On, let's say, a software company that is maybe 4 or 5 years old, that requires a lot of services to deliver their product into the market, but yet is still unpredictable in their demand, might leverage, say, a 30 to 40% contractor base because their demand only comes from the software that's sold. As a service entity, they don't control all of their demand, and so they might leverage a higher contractor base or even VAR network, to deliver those services with them. So key thing is resource mix in managing the growth of your business. And I'm just pausing here to keep up with appears to be just a slight lag here with GoToMeeting. A foundational metric of every services business then is utilization, right? And it's particularly important when you're dealing with your employees. Really, you're talking about your bench. And when you're looking at your bench and their contribution to the overall profitability of your business. I show just a snapshot here from within Mavenlink and how we provide that information available to people in real time all the time. You would not want to be in this position, right, of having personnel across the board who are only 22.9% utilized. As I mentioned, the top firms will shoot to have an 85 to potentially even 95% utilization, so billable time versus non-billable time, and people allocated to revenue-generating projects, right? So by having some predictability, not only in your current utilization, but also forecasted revenue and the utilization of your personnel, allows you to determine when can I take on the next job, should I hire more people, based on the range of the services offerings that I want to do, and be able to really compare then the plan versus actual cost on both a historical and a forecasted basis. Coupled then with utilization is the concept of margin. So margin, as we talked about earlier, is determined by many, many things and needs to be managed as your business grows at the overall business level, client or even client group level, at the project and individual resource. And the key measure there is the margin percent. At each of those levels, you need to know what margin is with BD costs, right, without your BD costs. So you can look at both at a client as well as across the business and be able to do that in real time versus look at your margins over a monthly basis or 60-day basis. Really be able to look at them ongoing all the way down to the individual resource. One of the last items to consider, really, this is the bookends of the business process that I talked about, which is business development on the one end that can contribute to margin improvement or margin loss, and then execution errors. These are really hidden costs. So I talked in margin analysis, being able to track business development time and expense, right, and the overall client margin, not just the how profitable or just looking at job costing, how am I at the particular project or job, but really taking into account business development expense. Flushing out ineffective pricing or services. Managing DSO, right? So really looking at the days of sales outstanding and the infrastructure and process that you have related to billing terms and collection cycle. This is a particular challenge in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. If you have poor ability to manage time and expense, develop invoices based on time and expense, get those into the prime contractor on the job on a timely basis, you may end up in the situation where many in the architecture, engineering, construction industry are, which is a 100 days outstanding of your sales. So 100 days from the time you invoice to the time that you get paid is often what happens in the industry. So looking to improve operations through integrated technology is often one of the key answers to helping that. Making sure that you're tracking and billing for any changes. We talked about execution errors. This is setting expectations up front, having clearly defined scope and statements of work, and then being bold when clients ask for changes, right? And making sure what should be included, what shouldn't be included, and getting paid for what you're delivering and where you're adding value. The one thing that's also critical is the effects of employer-contractor personnel swaps. We talked about execution risk if you use contractors where they're not in your employ, they're in the employ of others, and they may leave that contractor, and the impact on an execution risk in your projects of backfilling that person, bringing them up to speed. Oftentimes that ends up as non-billable work, right? It just erodes your margins. And so really teaming up with great contractors where they have stability in their workforce is key. And the other one that's particularly important in software companies is the deliverable rework, right? Where you gave them exactly what they asked for, but not what they needed, right? And they don't know about it until you deliver it. And so managing rapid iterations and managing the scope is key in software work. And all of these things need to be taken into account when managing the margins of your business. And so this is to set kind of the tone and framework when we look at developing technology for all of you to help improve your business. we take into account all of these dimensions of managing services businesses across the board, so that when you're in there in real time working with your customers, determining can you add personnel, looking at forecasted revenue, managing your margins and utilization, we understand that business, and really the ability to open up this dialogue with you so that you can share your practices, what practices are winning for you, so that we can seek to incorporate that in the services we provide back to you. So I mentioned that this would not be, a Mavenlink demonstration, but you can get that from our website, and we'd be happy to do that for you. When you look at technology considerations, for those that use Mavenlink, we're happy that you do. We're going to continue to deliver fantastic features based on the things that you tell us that you need, as well as our overall experience. But for those that are still in decision mode, there's a lot of choices out there. We think there are a few good ones, but today you can go on the web and you can do searches, and you can, with software as a service, you can go on and try these things, and you're going to have the potential to look at a lot of technologies out there. When we look at the new wave of software and have it software as a service, we really view it as success as a service. And one of the things that we try and differentiate ourselves is we use our professional services roots and try and look at things like adoption, training, as well as taking input from our customers to make sure we're aligned on helping them deliver their business. And so you really look at the vendor domain expertise, right? That they know the services industry and your particular segment of vertical industry, the service and training they provide. One of the things that happened with software as a service versus on-premise software, on-premise had the expectation that it was going to tow along a lot of training and implementation and conversion and integration, and there was an expectation of like a 3x services cost on top of the technology that you bought. Somehow being able to go on and click start and engage with the software technology kind of missed the adoption and training and how I'm going to leverage this new technology in my business. And so, looking at how the adoption is going to occur and the service provided by the provider is key. And tying into the availability, right? Are they always on, ready to serve you, is key. And then the viability. With so many new technologies coming on board, what's the viability of the provider? You can't have too many restarts on leveraging technology for your business. It's time-consuming and exhausting, and picking the right vendor there is key. And then, of course, the feature set, right? Are the capabilities there? And what's the rate of new feature development? With software as a service, the game has changed. The rate of feature development can be quite rapid, and with continuous deployment, you can develop dozens of new features can be deployed every week if the vendor has a good engineering function. And then also the extensibility of the product, right? You need to consider things like APIs, and can you write customizations or have customizations written to it, or integration with other technologies. And so, then you make the choice of, do you look at unified suites? Is there an all-in-one solution versus niche and integrating several products together, right? Typically, if you can get an integrated suite, this is my experience, and it meets 80 to +% of the capabilities, that's typically the lowest cost solution on a number of fronts. Skills required to understand the software, training, integration costs, those kinds of things. Typically, suites tend to provide the best value over time. Product usability. One of the key things with this new Agent SaaS, especially with collaboration software, is that you bring people in, both inside your company, your customers, your contractor base, and you're not bringing them and taking them whole through a change management and training process. It needs to be simple to use right out of the gate, and they need to be able to engage with you and have a great experience doing that. And so usability is key to adoption and usage and having a good customer experience. We talked about integration partners. Even the, quote, all-in-one solutions are not going to fulfill everything. It doesn't make sense to do so. For example, at Mavenlink, we've chosen not to develop our own general ledger software, right? We've chosen first integration to do that with Intuit QuickBooks, and we have others planned depending on the size of the company. Also things like integration with Salesforce, Zendesk, and others. And then the other thing is scalability. As you grow your business, can your provider scale with you, both in terms of the product and its usage and bandwidth and infrastructure, but as well as the service they provide to you. And so that's the key set of things that I wanted to do to get mind share, let you know where we're coming from on Mavenlink, share our experience and winning practices with you, and to let you know where we're coming from so that we can continue to work with you in delivering what you need to go help grow your businesses confidently and profitably. So with that, let me go ahead and open it up to questions that have come in, and I'm going to ask Sean here to moderate to an extent here some of the income.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for the participation. A lot of good feedback, Ray, where you were speaking about how this is resonating with their experiences in their own particular verticals. And so thank you for all those comments. Please do ask us any questions, though, that might have been driven by the conversation. We look forward to answering them. We have a few to get started, but welcome some more in that right-hand column there next to your GoToMeeting webinar. So one of the questions we got would be, what would be a good target margin for a services group within a software company?
So I like this question because it was a vexing problem for me when I was at Inquira. And I also had the opportunity while I was at Accenture. One of my key segments of customers that I served was in the software segment, both small and large companies with market caps as large as 10 billion down to fairly large ones still, 500 million. But really looking at the mix of services in those businesses, the importance of services in those businesses, and running those businesses as a profit center versus call it a loss leader or something that just helps sell software. Most software companies run their services businesses either at a loss or at margin neutral, and I've never thought that to be a good practice. It's really unnecessary. Though the demand for software, the services of a software company come solely from the sale of that technology. They can be sold often at a premium because you've got the best talent to go deliver that. And so a good target margin for a services business within inside a software company ought to be 30%. It's not the 45 to 55 that you might have in a mature professional services company that's an independent services company, because you've got some a spiky demand. Sometimes you have to carry a bench often, but a 30% margin can be and should be a target margin for a services business inside of a software company.
Perfect. Another question, I think a very good one. It says, you mentioned days of sales outstanding for the architecture industry. Do you have any data points on what might be a good days of sales outstanding for an IT services business?
IT services businesses, they're deliverable-based businesses, right? And most IT projects have some duration to them that's 60, 90 days. They're new websites, new software products, mobile apps, etc. Most of those projects are delivered still on a time and materials basis. There's often changes that occur throughout the execution of those. Most people are unwilling to take on too much of that on a fixed bid basis because the requirements are often shifting. And so it's a time and materials basis. For companies that are above 30 to 40 people, often they're net 30, right, types of things. So they're going to have some lag in those payments. And so if they can get to a 40-day DSO, they're running a pretty good business. If they can, oftentimes they can bill up front sometimes for half of those services, so they can get a portion of that up front. So there's some techniques that can lower that overall, but the industry standard is going to be about 40%, 40 days of sales outstanding in that business. And if you're a larger business, you can do it. The smaller businesses usually can't accommodate that, right? They don't have enough projects going on where they're getting paid frequently, and often need to do some upfront billing and that kind of thing, which means their DSO goes way down for somebody who's got, say, less than 10 people.
Perfect. And really quickly, there's been a number of questions about the availability of this webinar, the recorded version, as well as the PowerPoint deck. I want to make sure everybody knows we will get those into your hands as soon as we're downloaded, recorded, put that into YouTube, and we'll get that into your hands in terms of the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides. Also, there's a number of questions related to the Mavenlink product. And Ray and I are very, very proud of what we've accomplished here at Mavenlink, and we could spend hours and hours talking about that. But in the interest of time, what we'll do is we'll follow up with those product-based questions at a later point and really focus the rest of this discussion continued on the industry of services business.
Sure. I appreciate that. And you know, when I was scrolling through the list of participants, there were some recognizable names. I mean, we know these customers. We like to consider ourselves to be accessible for our customer base, and many of our customers, and we have, you know, just tens and tens of thousands of them, I know their names, right, because they've been very vocal and interactive and expressive in terms, and they're just extremely knowledgeable about how to run their services business. And they drive us on requirements, and we absolutely love that. We go through iteration planning on our product. Well, we prioritize features essentially every day, right, but we try and stay on track on iterations about every 6 weeks to deliver major functionality, typically, though, delivering, you know, modest enhancements on a weekly basis. But we want all that feedback. We want the input because it drives everything we do.
Perfect. So a couple great questions coming in fast here. So question for you, Ray. Where is the best place to recruit the best and brightest from the contingent workforce? In the accounting services space, people are used to billing by the hour as opposed to the project, and we bill by the project as our business model. Any help you can provide?
So the question relates to where to find talent, where to recruit. This is an accounting, so it's a potentially CPA business. Well, that's an interesting question because, you know, I mean, some of you may have seen or heard or know what our, you know, long-term vision of this company is. But as I mentioned, we've got hundreds of thousands of people who use Mavenlink all across the globe from every kind of service imaginable. And we have a vision of having you all connect with each other, right, in a way that we call Mavenlink Networks. And we will open that up at some point and allow you all to establish a business network that we think would rival something far larger than Accenture or anybody else on planet Earth can provide. And so that's the intent that we have as we build this community, to just, you know, uncork it and let it go. That said, right, in the meantime, you know, sort of where do you go to find talent? And there's really, you know, it's the offline networks. What I do find, though, that really works, depending on the kind of accounting service, if it's an advisory service where you're really looking at, you know, policies and procedures and even some business strategy leverage, and therefore things that we're doing, profitability and growth and business construct and that kind of thing, you're typically looking at more seasoned business consultants, and that comes through networking, right? And you've just got to participate and leverage your networking skills to go do that. If it's more junior folks and you need people who can come in and perform audits and that kind of thing, of course, you know, given my background, you can hire extremely talented people right out of college. And so recruiting out on the college base with people who, you know, have participated in the accounting fraternities like Beta Alpha Psi and who are just dyed-in-the-wool, you know, business majors and accountants. There's a lot of talent in school today of folks that are really challenged getting out there and getting work. And so that's back to the pyramid that I talked about, is leveraging both the seasoned personnel as well as the junior folks who can go in and help you do stellar work.
Perfect. Another great question. From a gentleman who runs a consulting firm, similar to an architecture and engineering firm. Question says, we often have to calculate rates based on unburdened wages, indirect overhead costs with a fixed fee percentage profit. Is there a guideline for setting those fixed fees that you know of?
You know, I don't know. I'd have to give that one some more thought. You know, I mean, the key thing is you need to have a target margin for your business. You know, bottom line, you need to know what the range of services that you provide, the skill sets that you have, and what the acceptable margins are that you would have on both the low end as well as what your target is. And then you need to be competitive, right? And that's really the bottom line, right? And so you need to look at where you have cost buildup in your business, and based on the target margin that you need to have to run that business, and have a competitively based, you know, fee business. And I'd have to give that one some more thought.
Well, and one thing too to add, and we're going to say this at the end, but I want to mention it right now because it's very relevant based on the number of questions that are coming in right now. Mavenlink's going to be investing heavily in an extensive data aggregation approach, and we're going to be looking at the over 100,000 services businesses that use Mavenlink today, understanding an aggregate for industry, for geography, for size of the business, what typical and expected averages, means, trends might be related to utilization, margin, profitability, DSO, all of those key metrics that Wei was describing, so that we'll have a point of view and information from you based on those surveys and information that we send out, and we'll report that back to you. So just as a heads up for the group, the 500 folks that are on this today, we will be reaching out to you with a survey. It'll be a short survey, 10 to 15 minutes, but the promise on our side in return is we will be spending countless hours making sure we pull together really good reporting for you around what are the key performance indicators in this space.
Sean, I appreciate you making that comment because it's core to the continued engagement that we have with our user base. Is we want to be that resource because we have such an expansive base from around the globe. Is be able to provide that by industry vertical, by geography, be a resource for companies versus just our own experience. Let's leverage tens and tens of thousands of inputs and provide that back to our base that typically only the largest of firms would have enough data points across their customer base to be able to do. Again, when it comes to leveling the playing field, we want to be that aggregator of that data and provide that back to our customer base.
Okay. Another good question from one of our participants. How can we mitigate the risk of our contractors communicating with our clients and then trying to steal the client? We love the idea of integration of client and contractors because it solves a lot of problems of the scope of work, but are concerned about the risk.
Yeah, that's an ongoing dialogue that we've had, even internally in Mavenlink when it comes to inviting people in this collaborative world. Certainly it goes on in the offline world where you bring in a subcontractor and you're the prime and you have the overall client relationship. And it's really a matter of trust and integrity that you have with that provider. That they're not going to go make an end around contract directly. It's also the relationship and trust that you have with your customer base, right? That they understand at the outset that these are resources that you've nurtured. You're responsible for the delivery of their work, and so that translates into the online world as well. The only thing that I would say is that as we look forward to what we call Mavenlink networks, and the comment I made earlier about connecting all of you together to conduct business online in a contractor, subcontractor, client service relationship, is because a lot of the work is going on virtually, and that somebody might want to send a private message and say, hey, customer, glad we're introduced by Joe. I can provide you a 20% discount if you contract with me directly, right? Is that we've thought about some controls on those introductions, and if you've introduced somebody to a client in an online environment like this, and they then independently go and contract through Mavenlink to go to that about it, right? And so we've thought about that problem and the way that we might do that in an online world to help, one, safeguard, but two, kind of reinforce this or enforce this trust metric.
Perfect. Another good question. Now this is some more comments here on the aggregate data. Thank you for those positive things. We will be sharing that with everybody on this webinar as soon as it's pulled together. Again, your participation is appreciated as we gather the data. Another question that's similar though. Understanding 22% utilization is low from the slide. 85 to 90% utilization is the target for the larger public consulting firms. Do you have any thoughts on what a healthy utilization percentage might be for a marketing agency of under 50 employees?
Yeah, I think that once you reach a certain size, and I would say that's in the actually 30 people or above. 30 people or above, you've got leverage in a business like that, meaning people who are focused on business development versus it's the business owner who's got to do both business development, admin, and execution. You typically find that even in 5, 10, even 15 person services business, once you get to be 30 and above, you can operate to those target margins of 85% certainly for all of your billable resources who are not out there doing business development or any admin or anything like that. All of the quote delivery personnel should be at that 85% target. When you're at 85%, I'll call it sort of that's the upper end. That would be the ideal, most profitable resource utilization target that allows allows somebody still some time to attend meetings, get some training, work on a new service offering, those kinds of things. It gives some room because you want that to continue to grow your business. But an 85% utilization of billable time for that person should be achieved. And you've got a lesser target then for business development folks. Within the large firms, there would still be, even with partners and business development people in a large services firm, there would still be a billable time component to even those people that are out there doing business development. It might even be as high as in the 20 to 40% range for partners in the large firms. And so billable is always important. People who are not doing any business development, 85% should be a target, and 20 to 40% for even business development folks could be a target as well.
Excellent. Here's another ratio target question, but a good one. Can you recommend a ratio of employees versus contractors for an architecture and engineering company?
It really depends. To some of the earlier comments, the maturity of the business and the consistency of demand flow, I think, are the key things, as well as the range of service offerings that you want to provide. And so if the business is immature or just starting out, it might be a couple of founders leveraging their network, and they're seeking some of those key early contract wins. If it's a mature business, it really depends on the range of the service that you want to provide. Also the duration of the types of projects. And so it depends on a number of things.
Okay. In the pie chart you mentioned that only about 34% on average is billable. And as you're looking at things like traveling, planning, administration, how do you cover those costs? Do you raise prices? Any thoughts?
Yeah. The 34% is, I'll say, it's at the lower end, right? This would be somebody who, this is an individual consultant, right, who does the typical, they're usually providing services locally. And so, they may even, if it's, we're here on the west coast of California, and so I might have clients in Southern California and San Francisco. And so I've got some flying time and some back and forth, and so I could be at that low end of 34%. One of the things that when we first started Mavenlink, and I thought for these individual practitioners, what does doing work online allow you to do? And I use the term simultasking, right? That allows you to serve more clients at the same time, because you can simultask work, right? You can reduce your travel time. Leveraging a technology like Mavenlink allows you to reduce your admin time. If you're leveraging a lot of contractors, let's say you're still a solo practitioner, but you've got a network of contractors, right? Leveraging Mavenlink to handle your communications infrastructure, your time and expense management, even invoicing. All of those things can up the chargeability factor across the board, as well as manage the margins that you make on your subcontractors.
Another very good question. How can we reach you after the webinar? So a couple ways. Certainly we can show you our contact information via email and Twitter here. Ray has just updated the screen. Hopefully you'll see that in just a moment. You can also reach out. There was a request for phone number. You can reach us at 949-336-7610. And we're happy to talk to you there. A couple more questions, and then we'll probably wrap it up on time here. One of the questions was related to integrations. And you're looking at technology companies. Are there sort of key and core integrations that we see as important, or are there some that are not as important as you're looking at technology?
Sure. Well, so one of the key aspects of Mavenlink is defining the boundary conditions of the technology. What will we provide versus not? Meaning we want to go far enough to leverage the value of the all-in-one and lowered costs of the things that I mentioned on integrations and having to have skills in our customer base to maintain and know all these different products. So we want to have as much of all-in-one as possible. And so the boundary conditions I would provide for most of the industries verticals that use Mavenlink are what I'll call the general ledger, or just the financial function. So general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, any of that, we want to have an integration partner for. And we would see those partners as Intuit for the small businesses, usually up to 100 people, would be leveraging Intuit QuickBooks, some even larger than that. From a CRM perspective, though we will be rolling out what I'll call a light CRM that may be even underselling what we plan. But for those companies that leverage Salesforce or Infusionsoft or even Sugar, having a more robust CRM capability that would integrate and work with Mavenlink. For the smaller companies, I think what we're planning for CRM would be more than sufficient. We're debating to what extent do we leverage something like Zendesk as a ticketing system with Mavenlink. A lot of the IT services providers want to see us either integrate or have our own, leverage our project tracker and turn that into a bit of a ticketing system that would flow into a project for larger types of tickets or case resolutions. So we're debating that one. The other one is storage. And so we integrate with Google Docs. Of course, you can upload any file from any other data source in your own hard drive or network, but also things like Box or Dropbox or you send it. We're going to be allowing for a 2 gigabyte file upload here shortly, so very, very large file uploads within Mavenlink. And then other types of things for the architecture and construction that use things like from Autodesk, like Buzzsaw, being able to target some of these very industry-specific, authoring and storage technologies. Perfect.
Well, let's wrap up, everyone. Thank you so much for the time. A couple of very key things that we wanted to get across. We will be following up to everyone with recording of the webinar. We'll also be sending out the PowerPoint slides for the webinar. And additionally, as we mentioned, we'll be sending out a very short survey. We appreciate your 5 to 15 minutes in helping us fill that out. And again, the promise in return is we will be pulling together a number of specific industry reports related to the aggregate data. So certainly nothing confidential will be shared, but the aggregate data related to this space that Ray described so well today. And also, lastly, to let you know, this is going to be an ongoing investment on the part of Mavenlink. We're going to continue. Ray is very focused on this space, this area, and how Mavenlink as an organization can support the industry as a whole, not only with products, but very much so with the data and information and relevant indicators that can help you be successful and grow your business. So thanks again for all the time today. Please reach out to us with any questions. We look forward to speaking with you in the very near term.
Thank you, everybody. Look forward to talking to you in a future event. And please, email, telephone, Twitter. We're looking forward to being accessible to you and engaging. Thank you.